Welcome to Uriah Heep, the Magician's Podcast. I'll be covering every studio song the band has recorded and every bonus track that I can find. Each week we'll go over a new song from the beginning to where they are currently, and as they keep adding albums, I'll keep adding shows. Let the deep dive party begin.
In the magic garden, some were singing, some were dancing.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Uriah Heep, the Magician's Podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, and you know what? As I was getting ready to record this episode, the garbage truck came by and made such a ruckus that car alarms were going off all around it. I had to wait a few minutes until everything's settled, but back on track now, and it's a good thing, because we have a very lengthy song today coming in at just under 8 minutes. The original was about 8.5. We're talking today about The Golden Palace from Sonic Origami. I originally covered this song back on December 21st of 2021, just shy of Christmas. And we've got a lot to cover, so let's just get right into it. Here in the band is, of course, Trevor Boulder on bass, Mick Box on guitar, Lee Kerslake on drums, Phil Lanzon on keys, and Bertie Shaw on vocals. Here we go. I'm just going to stop the intro right here. I honestly can't tell if that's a real flute or not. I know that Phil played flute on Mistress of All Time. So, and it was a synth patch. So that being the case, I'm going to say this is probably Phil playing it. The performance is great. The melody and everything is very beautiful. What I don't like is what I don't like about flute, and those frequencies that really kind of just sting my ear are coming through on this. And so it's making it really difficult for me to listen to. That, and also there's just like an over breath sound that comes with it. It's like too much. It doesn't sound realistic to me. I'm going to laugh if it turns out this is a real flute, but it just has too much buzz to it. You know, it's okay if you have a little bit of that, but it's too much for my ears. That coupled with the frequencies is kind of a shame, because this is a really beautiful opening. I love the mood it's setting. But man, it's hard to listen to. Now this is absolute candy to my ears. Love the cello. I love the gentleness of it. It sounds like there's a little bit of a delay with some reverb on it, but it's so gentle and subtle, and it just kind of carries you away, as opposed to the flute, which kind of pushes me a little bit. I'm sure that wasn't the intent, but just because of those certain frequencies that really get on my nerves with a flute, and why I don't like the flute, and they happen to be prominent in this particular performance. And mix, I should say, because a lot of that can be EQ'd out without hurting the performance, but it wasn't in this case. Not a fan of that so much, but this is really nice. I'm loving this part right here. I could listen to a whole song just based on this section right here.
Look behind the door, take it by force, but I'm not guilty of the crime. can this be real? What is against the law to say what's on your mind?
You know, aside from the vocals, because vocals often don't work for an opening of a film, this is very cinematic. I think this could have easily been the opening theme of a film. You're limited when you come to vocals because now the story has to match what's going on in the film. So you can't just select a song because you like the song or because part of it works, because those lyrics are going to drive the story. And if what you're singing about has nothing to do with the film, it makes no sense to use it. That's why for those of you guys who are fans of Rocky III and The Karate Kid might notice that You're the Best, Daniel's theme from the tournament, actually would fit better in Rocky because that was pitched and written for Rocky III. And it was voted down. Survivor's Eye of the Tiger was selected instead. But when you get to lines like history repeats itself and that kind of stuff, like it doesn't really work for Karate Kid, but it works for Rocky III because those lyrics were written for Rocky III. Unfortunately, they didn't go back and rewrite the lyrics to fit Karate Kid, which I think is kind of weird. I've always thought that was strange. They could have just gone in and re-recorded the vocal performance on top of the same music track, but they didn't. And that always seemed a little bit strange to me. But so this with vocals could work later on in the film if the vocals fit what's going on in the film. But musically, I think this would be a very wonderful opening title sequence for a film.
Then I see your face, so warm as it comforts me, tells me I am not alone. Pray for me tonight and give me the strength of love to help me cross the virgin snow.
I really like this change here. And for a second, just an inflection, it sounded a little bit Oriental, and now it's almost sounding a bit Southern. It's really interesting. This song is quite a voyage.
I will run till daybreak. My tears will fade away.
That was such a perfect delay on Bernie's voice there at the end. And also the backing vocals, very subtle and gentle, but I love the warmth of them. Fits in really well with this song. I would say warmth is one of the terms that I would use to describe this song. It just has some warm tones to it.
They will never take me again. No, I'm never going back. 'Cause when I get to the Golden Palace, everything will surely be so
The bass guitar sounds, again, really good. Love the tone and the definition of it. But I noticed earlier when it was playing the lower notes in the segment just before this, they sounded really good. And then all of a sudden it jumped up to a higher register, but just got lost in the mix almost completely. Could barely hear what it was doing at all. Now it's dialed back in a little bit better and I can hear what it's doing and appreciate it. It sounds really good. Typical creative Uriah Heep bass playing. Didn't like the backing vocals in this section quite as much. They stood out more. It felt more live theater, I think, than this. I can't think of the song it was. It might have been when I was working on The Lion King. I'm an audio engineer, so I've worked on some plays here in Vegas. It might have been when we were doing The Lion King that had like a similar backing vocal where it was like, it really stood out as a prominent feature instead of something supporting, and almost took the song over. And this kind of felt the same way. It was a little bit loud in the mix. It just felt a little more theatrical to me.
Can we give ourselves like a mother to a child? They took a part of
Well, you guys who have been listening to the show for a while know I'm a big fan of moments like this where we really get to hear Bernie. Yes, there's some instrumentation going on behind him, but he's not fighting a drum beat, keys and guitar, and, a groove and bass line. He's really kind of out front here. And I like it. I like that there's something supporting him so that it's not a cappella, but you really get a sense of how he's singing in this song, in this section. This is so well put together. That was a really nice build into here. And then we've got just these little string bits in between. I do want to make one more point about the flute, not to beat it to death, but when we hear violins playing on those notes, it's fine. It's lovely to me. It's very rare that I ever hear a violin kind of piercing my ear, even in the higher ranges. When I hear that flute in those exact same registers, it really does. It's just those frequencies cut through differently on a flute than they do on a violin. It's not the note, it's the note within the instrument. And that's why I've never really been a big fan of flute. It's why I've never really gotten into Jethro Tull. There's a couple songs I know that I like, but it's so flute oriented that it just doesn't interest me very much. Although, there's been some good songs. I really did like Cross-Eyed Mary. Now, very likely because it was blended so much more now and less featured as a solo instrument. The flute was not bad for me here, especially the beginning part. I thought that was nice. I also don't hear that same kind of resonation that I heard in the beginning of the song, so it's much more pleasant here. That being said, I'd still rather have like an oboe play this part instead of a flute. But this section sounded pretty good. Really like the changes here. This last one was quite nice and surprising. It's a good song. It is kind of repetitive. I think that middle section might have gone on a bit too long. But that's just my taste. I mean, when you're talking about an almost 8-minute song, there has to be a good reason that it's 8 minutes. And when you're just kind of repeating things like that, I'm really not sure you can justify the length of that, especially for the number of times that part is repeated so far in the song.
The snow is gone at last. I'm out of the shadows and into the sun. And then I see you smile, angel of mercy. The fight has just begun. I can hear them calling across the frozen line.
See, this is just elegant and beautiful. This is the kind of stuff that I could really listen to for a long time. And it makes me wonder too, if, and this is, I don't normally like to do this, but I'm just going to share this because it popped into my crazy head. If The Magician's Birthday, if the full concept of that album had been able to be met instead of the record company pushing to hurry up and get it written and get in the studio and record it, if Ken's original vision for that had included strings and a little bit of woodwinds, maybe not a flute, maybe more an oboe, with maybe a little bit of flute. Like I said, some of these sections aren't too bad. I wonder what that would have sounded like. I think that would have put it more in that cinematic fantasy realm than the album was, even with it being a heavy album. There were still songs like Blind Eye and Rain, and Tales wasn't very heavy. It was really more story driven. I don't know. I think that album would have been very interesting had it had this kind of production versus what they had. I love the album as it is, don't get me wrong, but listening to this stuff now just made me think immediately of what would The Magician's Birthday have been like if it had this kind of treatment to it. We'll never know, but it's something to think about or not think about. Choice is yours.
The world will hear us. It's never too late. 'Cause when we get to the Golden Palace, the memory will surely be so clean. Can we give ourselves like a mother to a
I always wonder why bands have so many repetitions on certain songs when on other songs, they know it just doesn't serve the song. And this one, I mean, how many times have we heard this part? It's been quite a few already. And while it's pleasing, I mean, it's nice to listen to. Again, this is just under 8 minutes long. Did it really need to be this long? Probably not, unless you were needing it to be a certain amount of time to fit something like a visual, like if this was used in a film or something like that. I certainly see the potential of it. I think it's kind of designed for soundtrack, to be honest. But just as a listener listening to it on an album, like if it needed to be 8 minutes for the film version, they could have cut it down to 4.5, 5 minutes for an album version and not been so repetitive. I probably made this argument the last time that I reviewed this song, considering last time it was 8.5 minutes. So that's an extra half a minute on top of what we have today. Overall, it's a very beautiful song. It's very elegant. It's the kind of stuff that we've heard them do a little bit throughout this era of the band's career, but certainly very different from where they started and where they're at now. I mean, I can't even imagine what the song would sound like if they did it today. There's so much heavier, and I don't know. I don't think that the song would work with the way that they're playing today. Maybe live it would. I don't know. But certainly as it is, if I put my producer hat on, I would probably chop, I'm going to guess, 1.5 minutes out of it and make it 6. Even that seems like it's a bit too much. But that one part, just the woes, goes on a little bit too long and a little bit too many times. I think if it were down to maybe 2 or 3 times, it would have a lot more impact than what we hear here, because it's like, okay, we're going into this part again. I'm already familiar with it. It's not standing out to me. What stands out is the change after it, when they make a change after it. But that part in particular, it's like, okay, we're doing this again. And again, it's just me. There are probably people out there that enjoy it just fine. I might be the only one that feels this way about it. But when I look at an 8-minute song, I mean, think about Magician's Birthday. That's a good long song. Salisbury is a good long song, but they move, they do different things. They keep it interesting. There's a lot of stuff that goes on with it, with those songs. Whereas this one, it was really more layering than anything else. And so I don't know. I mean, for me, I would like to cut that song down to maybe 5.5 or 6 minutes at least. Maybe trim a little more once I heard that. Who knows? But we don't have that version. We have this version, and I still give it a thumbs up because I think it's a very beautiful song. And we got through it pretty quick, despite my tirade about the flute. It happens. I have my opinions. What can I say? So we are off tomorrow, back to the Haskincast podcast for me tomorrow. And then Thursday, we're covering the final track on this album, one of the most famous and popular tracks by Uriah Heep. You know it. I know it. We'll see you on Thursday, guys. Cheers. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Uriah Heep, the Magician's Podcast. If you have enjoyed this show, please consider going over to Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast outlet, leaving a rating or a review. Be sure to subscribe to make sure that you are notified when new episodes are available. Please be sure to share this podcast with your fellow Uriah Heep enthusiasts and anyone who you think would like Uriah Heep, which should be everyone. And if you are so inclined, please feel free to contribute to the Patreon account. And if you are not a Patreon subscriber, you can also pay through the PayPal link on the website listed in the show links below. I would also like to thank Uriah Heep for their very generous support of the show. And thank you guys for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Happy days!